The night I discovered my wife's secret, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there in the darkness, hidden behind a wall of glass, watching the woman I loved more than my own life hand over innocent girls to a monster. And I had to decide, right there in that cold and terrible silence, whether to save my marriage or save their lives. I am Arjun, a soldier, a husband, a man who believed that loyalty was the highest form of love. And this is the story of how everything I believed was torn apart in a single night, and how I put it back together, piece by bloody piece. It started the way disasters always do, quietly. Girls were vanishing from our kingdom of Krishnapura, one every night. No trace, no struggle, no witnesses. Just empty beds and devastated families arriving at the palace gates at dawn, their eyes hollow with a fear they couldn't name. Our king, Rajendra Singh, a just and beloved ruler, had grown visibly older with each disappearance. The lines on his face deepened daily. The laughter that once filled his court had gone completely silent. He called me in on a morning when the air itself felt heavy. Arjun, he said, and the way he said my name told me everything about how serious this was. You are the only man in this kingdom I trust without reservation. These girls, somebody is taking them. This is not theft. This is not an accident. Something dark is at work here. Find it. Stop it. Whatever it takes. I bowed and left without a word. Because when your king looks at you like that, like you are the last candle in a very dark room, you don't make promises. You just go. For 2 weeks, I found nothing. No patterns, no suspects, no witnesses willing to talk. The fear had settled over the kingdom like a fog, and people kept their doors locked and their mouths shut after sunset. And then one night, riding patrol alone along the eastern road, I saw her. A woman moving fast through the darkness, wrapped in a white shawl, glancing over her shoulder every few steps. Her walk was wrong, too urgent, too frightened, too deliberate all at once. She knew exactly where she was going, and she didn't want anyone to follow. My chest tightened before my mind caught up, because I recognized that walk. I had watched that walk cross our home every day for 11 years. It was Mamta, my wife. I told myself I was wrong. I told myself 100 things as I tied my horse to a tree and followed her on foot into the trees. The forest closed around me like a fist. Cold, dark, every sound magnified. My heart was beating so loud I was certain she would hear it. But she didn't look back. She was focused, purposeful, moving deeper into the trees along a path that seemed to appear only for her. A hidden path, one she had clearly walked before. The light appeared before the building did, a strange, pulsing red glow filtering through the branches. Then the structure itself emerged from the darkness. A glass fortress, half buried in the forest, ancient and wrong-looking, surrounded by that crimson light. From somewhere inside, It came the sound of chanting, low, rhythmic, inhuman. I had heard stories about this place as a child. The Tantric's fortress. The place where dark power lived. I had assumed it was legend. I crouched behind the outer wall and peered through the glass. What I saw inside destroyed something in me permanently. 11 girls, chained to stone pillars, trembling, their faces blank with exhaustion and terror. At the center of the room, a figure in black robes moved around a fire altar. Nishad, the dark sorcerer, whose name was spoken only in whispers in the villages near the forest. He was performing a ritual. His hands moved through smoke and flame with the casual confidence of a man who had done this many times before. And standing beside him, close enough to touch Mamta, my wife. She was speaking to him in a low voice. I pressed closer to the wall, straining to hear. I brought you 11, she said. As you asked. Everyone you requested. Now bring back my daughter. That was our agreement. Nishad turned to her slowly. His smile was the most frightening thing I had ever seen.
Calm.
Patient. The smile of a man who has never once been afraid of being caught. Your daughter requires more power than I currently possess, he said, almost gently. The next full moon. 11 more girls on that altar. After that, I can restore her. Mamta's hands balled into fists at her sides. You promised. I promise many things, he said, and turned back to the fire. Our daughter, my daughter, Priya, taken from us 3 years ago by a fever that came in the night and left by morning, stealing her from our arms before either of us had time to understand what was happening. I had grieved. I had broken. I had slowly, painfully, rebuilt myself around that grief the way a tree grows around a wound. Mamta had not. Standing there in the dark, watching my wife's shoulders shake with a desperation so deep it had driven her to this, I felt something crack open in my chest. Not anger.
Not yet.
Something worse. Understanding. The most painful emotion in existence, because it means you cannot simply hate. You have to hold love and horror in the same 2 hands and figure out what to do with both. Mamta was not evil. She was broken. She was a mother who could not survive the loss of her child, and something had offered her a door back to that child, and she had walked through it without asking where it led. But 11 girls were chained to pillars inside that glass fortress. And more would follow if I did nothing. I walked away from the fortress that night without confronting either of them. Every step away from it felt like a failure. But charging in alone, without a plan, against a sorcerer of Nishad's power, that was not courage. That was surrender dressed as heroism. I needed something stronger than a sword. Before sunrise, I was climbing the mountain path to the hermitage of the old sage Vishvamitra, the only person in the kingdom whose knowledge ran deeper than the darkness I was facing. He listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. You already know what must be done, he said finally. I know, I said. I just don't know how to do it without destroying my wife in the process. Mamta is under Nishad's influence, he said. His magic has a hold on her grief. It has twisted her love into a weapon he can use. There is a flower, deep in the forest, past the trials that guard it, whose fragrance can break any enchantment of the mind. Bring it to her. Free her first. Then face him together. And Nishad himself? His power has one source. His ritual staff. Destroy it, and his magic collapses. But he will not let you near it. You will need to pass through his defenses first, and those defenses will test you in ways you are not expecting. He paused. Arjun, the trials do not test your strength. They test what you are made of underneath the strength. I took his blessing and entered the forest. The forest of trials is not like any forest you have walked through. It breathes. It watches. It pushes back against you in proportion to what you're afraid of. The first creature I met was a great bird with wings that caught the light like mirrors, ancient, territorial, furious at my presence. Answer my riddle or go no further, it said. What speaks without a voice, listens without ears, moves without wings, and runs without legs? I stood there in the half-light and thought about the nights I had spent wondering whether I had done enough to save Priya, whether I had missed something, whether a different doctor or a different prayer might have changed what happened. The sound of those thoughts, that endless, voiceless conversation with myself. An echo, I said. The bird's wings folded. It stepped aside. The river came next, swift and dark, with 3 questions rising from its surface like mist. What has no shadow? Darkness itself. What grows larger the more you take from it? A hole. What always moves forward and never returns?
Time.
The water parted. On the other side of the river, 3 shimmering figures stood at the edge of a lake, shapes made of light, watching me with eyes I couldn't quite see. Truth speaks here, the first one said. What is more powerful, a king's force or his people's faith?
Faith, I said.
A king without his people is just a man holding a chair. The first figure dissolved. What matters more, wealth or honor? Honor, I said. I've seen men with nothing who are rich in the only way that counts. The second figure dissolved. If you had to choose between your life and your kingdom, which would you give? I thought of the girls chained in that fortress. I thought of the families waiting at palace gates in the gray morning light. I thought of my king's face when he said my name. My kingdom, I said, because my life without purpose is just time passing. The third figure dissolved, and the lake cleared. I was nearly at the garden when I heard the crying. It was a small sound, animal, heartbroken, coming from somewhere to my left. Every instinct of a trained soldier told me to keep moving. Every instinct of a human being told me to stop. I stopped. A monkey sat at the base of a tree, holding nothing, searching the air with frantic eyes. Its child had wandered into a cave nearby, and inside the cave, a lion had found it first. The sensible thing was to leave. The correct thing, strategically, was to leave. I was on a mission that could not afford delays, and the forest was full of creatures who were not my responsibility. I went into the cave anyway. The lion was enormous, old, and completely unmoved by my arrival. It regarded me with the calm contempt of something that has never needed to be afraid of anything. "That child is mine now," it said. "The child is innocent," I said. "You know it. I know it. Neither of us believes that eating the innocent is worthy of real power." The lion looked at me for a long time. "Then what do you propose, soldier?" "Take me instead," I said. "I'm bigger. I'm a better meal. And I'll come willingly, which means you won't have to work for it." I meant it. Standing there in that cave, looking at the lion's eyes, I meant every word of it. Not because I wasn't afraid, I was terrified, but because there are things that matter more than surviving. The lion was quiet. Then something shifted in its expression. Not softness, exactly. Recognition. "Very few creatures," it said slowly, "offer their lives for another, without calculation. I have lived long enough to know what that is worth." It moved aside. "Go, both of you." The monkey was waiting at the cave entrance. When I handed the child back, it held it for a long moment without speaking. Then it pressed something into my palm, a small, glowing fruit. "This will protect you," it said, "against what's coming." The garden at the heart of the forest was the most beautiful place I had ever seen, and I barely noticed it because in the center of all those colors, a single flower glowed in a golden cage, and beside the cage stood an old soldier with a sword. "To take the flower," he said, "you must give your most precious possession." I thought about what I owned, what I valued. Then I understood. "My soul," I said. "If it serves the kingdom, it's given freely." The cage dissolved. The soldier smiled and lowered his weapon. "Use this only for righteousness," he said, "and it will never fail you." I reached for the flower. It bloomed in my hand and spoke. "One more question, traveler. What is always present but never seen? And when it finally shows itself, everything has already changed." I looked at the flower. I thought of Priya, 3 years gone. I thought of Mamta, trapped in grief, so heavy it had bent her into a shape I didn't recognize. I thought of all the time we had spent moving through loss without ever speaking about it directly, time slipping through our hands like water while we both pretended we were fine. "Time," I said quietly. "It's always time." The flower lit up my hands like a second sunrise. When I found Mamta, she was alone near the edge of the forest, moving in the mechanical way of someone who has stopped believing their choices belong to them. I stepped out of the trees and she froze. I held the flower toward her without speaking. The fragrance reached her before I did, soft and clear and warm, like the smell of something you loved as a child that you forgot you missed. I watched her face change. The blankness cracked. Her eyes filled with something that had been missing from them for a very long time. Herself. Arjun. Her voice broke on my name. What did I do? It was not a question. She already knew. You were trying to save our daughter, I said. And something used that love against you. Those girls are still alive, I said. And we're going to get them out. Together. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not gratitude, not relief. Something more like the specific emotion of being known completely by another person, even at your worst, and still being chosen. Together, she said. We moved through the forest toward the glass fortress with a clarity I had never felt in battle. Not the reckless clarity of anger, but the steady, clean clarity of people who know exactly what they are doing and exactly why. Nishad was waiting. Of course he was. Men like him always sense when the balance has shifted. The flower, he said, staring at my hand. Impressive. But what do you imagine that changes? Everything, I said. He unleashed his power. Walls of dark energy, summoned shapes, waves of force that rattled the glass walls. I held the flower steady and let its light push back, and for every step he drove us backward. We took 2 forward. Mamta moved alongside me with the quiet precision of someone who understood exactly how Nishad worked because she had been close enough to study him. She saw the moment. His attention shifted toward me for just a second too long. She moved. His staff shattered in her hands. The sound it made when it broke was not loud. It was actually very quiet, a soft, almost disappointed sound, like something that had been holding its breath for a very long time finally letting go. Nishad's darkness folded inward. His power, untethered from its source, turned on him the way all unearned power eventually does. He aged in seconds, decades collapsing across his face, and then he was simply gone, and the red light went out, and the only thing left in the fortress was the sound of chains hitting stone as the locks fell open. 11 girls blinked in the sudden darkness. Then they saw us. When we returned to the palace, King Rajendra came down from his throne to meet us, which he never did for anyone. He looked at the girls first, counting them, and I watched relief move through him like a wave. Then he looked at me, then at Mamta. I told him everything. Not because I had to, because she deserved to be known truthfully in all of it, and to face it with her head up. The king was quiet for a very long time. Grief, he said finally, is the most dangerous thing in a kingdom. More dangerous than enemy armies, because it attacks from inside. He looked at Mamta with something that was not quite forgiveness, that would take longer, but was the beginning of it. You will spend the rest of your life making this right, he said. And I believe you will. He turned to me last. Arjun, you had every reason to choose the easier path. You could have come to me immediately. You could have let the law handle your wife. Instead, you chose a harder road, to understand before you judged. To save before you surrendered. That is not just the duty of a soldier. He placed his hand on my shoulder. That is the courage of a man who knows what love actually costs. The girls went home. One by one, in the weeks that followed, the families came to thank us. Some of them could not speak. They just held our hands and cried. A few of them asked about Mamta, hesitantly, carefully, not knowing how to feel about the woman who had led their daughters into the dark and then helped bring them back out. I didn't have an easy answer for them. Some things cannot be resolved into simple lessons. Some choices break everything and still deserve to be understood. What I know is this: the darkness that almost consumed my wife was not born from cruelty. It was born from love with nowhere to go, from grief that no one helped her carry, from a mother's heart that refused to accept an ending and found a door that should never have been opened. I am still a soldier. I still serve the king. I still believe that duty and honor are the architecture that holds everything else up. But I also know now that the most dangerous enemies are not the ones who come at you with swords. They are the ones who find the people you love at their most broken and offer them exactly what they most desperately need. And the only weapon against that kind of darkness is not strength. It is not intelligence. It is not even courage. It is the willingness to walk into the worst moment of someone else's life, hold a light steady, and say, "I see you, all of you, and I am not leaving." That is what I did, and that, in the end, is the only victory that has ever mattered to me.